Welcome to the Braver Angels podcast, a new way of talking politics. I'm your host for today, Bill Doherty. I'm one of the co-founders of Braver Angels and the lead designer of our workshops. And I'm joined today by my other two co-founders of Braver Angels, David Blankenhorn and David Lapp, to do the second part of the conversation about the origins of Braver Angels. In the prior podcast, we stopped at the founding workshop, the Red Blue workshop, in December of 2016, and so we're gonna pick it up from there. So, gentlemen, great to be doing this again with you.
Good to be with both of you.
And we may not remember everything the same, right? So that's okay. We'll be co-constructing some history here. So let's go back to we finished that first workshop, and we had some decisions to make about whether it was a one-off, good experience and a document came out of it, whether we were going to do it again, and what that might look like. So let's just get back into that mindset of the decisions that unfolded, because as we've all said in many settings, there was no big strategic plan here. And so
I had a secret plan. I just hadn't revealed it to you yet.
Thank you. You everything that has unfolded, you had in your mind.
I had it. I just didn't want to rush into it.
I understand. So that would be the mythology. So what was the truth?
That's right.
Why don't you start us off, David?
That's right.
Yeah. Just where your thoughts were then?
As best I remember, I think my thought was, let's do another one, because it had been a very powerful experience. You remember it was long over the course of the whole weekend, and it was I think for all of us, many of us, just a transformative experience. And my only thought was, let's see if let's see if lightning strikes twice. Let's do another one. But what do you guys remember?
Yeah, I mean, that's my recollection as well. I guess I'm interested, though, in thinking back. And I mean, David, the way that I first got to know you, and I think Bill as well, was you were leading a think tank, bringing together mainly scholars and public intellectuals. We could have done that. We could have just said, okay, this was an interesting gathering of ordinary citizens in an obscure town in small town Ohio. Why did you think to yourself, well, let's keep on trying to bring ordinary citizens together, rather than doing what you'd done for a long time, which was bringing together scholars and public intellectuals?
It just felt like this was a problem that had to be addressed, maybe first and foremost at the citizenship level, the grassroots level, that if you were really going to do something about the issue of polarization, starting with the elite world, which is what we had done in the think tanks, as that wouldn't, another conference at the Aspen Institute was not going to solve the problem of polarization, even though the Aspen Institute's a great place and a lot of smart people go there and write reports and do things. David, I remember talking with you about this too. We didn't have a grassroots plan, but I think we had a sense that something very profound was happening in the country, and it wasn't really going to be solved absent some stirrings among the citizenry.
Yeah, I mean, I recall too that there was just an electricity that came out of that first gathering that I think many of us felt. And I think, we were just thinking to ourselves, and I remember, some of the participants said, well, we'd like to help do this in other communities across the country.
Right, that came out.
I think it just, was like,
yes, well, David, you have a grassroots bent, in terms of the way you think, and Bill, I guess you have a foot in both worlds, but this was not alien. The idea of working at the grassroots was not alien to us, even though it had to be a conscious decision. I'm sorry, David, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, so I remember, David Lapp, that people wanted to get together again. So we had a reunion. You want to talk about how that came about?
Yeah, so the first gathering was December 9th through the 11th, 2016. We released the report, I think it was in early February, which was about that gathering. We sent it out to the media, and other, friends and leaders across the country in our, small subscriber list at that point. And then we had NPR. You can talk more about that, Bill, but we had two of the participants from that first workshop appear at NPR. But then a month, so that was in March when the NPR interview happened. And then in April the 8th of 2017, we had a reunion of the first, the work of the participants from that first workshop. And that reunion came about because, as you said, Bill, people said, well, let's see what we can do next. Let's get back together and see what's possible here. So we did. We met at that first meeting was at the South Lebanon Community Center, and our reunion was in that building. And
you organized that, David, didn't you? You organized that, yeah.
And I think almost everyone, almost all of the 21 participants regathered for the reunion. And then the conclusion of that was, yes, let's form a local group that wants to address polarization. And by the way, that was not the idea of forming local groups. I recall a conversation we had about, well, is this something that we want to do, or just do we want to go around doing these workshops and then just let it there, and if something happens by themselves among the citizens, great, but do we really want to ourselves do the work of helping to organize local groups, what we now call alliances? And I think really it was just the energy from the reunion and from the people saying, yes, we really want to do this, it just kind of forced, we just went with the wind, right? We just, okay, well, I guess we'll go in that direction.
That's exactly how I remember it too.
And we had no funding at that point. I
Not a nickel.
I cashed in another frequent flyer ticket to go back to Ohio, but there was this sense. So I'm glad we're talking about this. That there was this energy in people. We can't just stop this. We can't just let this go. And I remember being so inspired by that.
Yeah, and you talk about that. I mean, and that we also saw that as a result of the interview that we did with NPR. Bill, you want to talk about that and how that happened? Because that was really key to people finding out about that first gathering.
Yeah, I have told that NPR interviewer, Carrie Miller, a number of times how instrumental her decision to have us on was in our development. I, as you guys have worked in the family area, marriage, fatherhood, and all that. And so I had done Minnesota Public Radio interviews with journalist Carrie Miller for years. And in January, after our initial workshop, I was on her show talking about marriage or family. And when the show was over, I said, oh, by the way, I was at this workshop. We did this thing in December in Ohio, and she's a political journalist, not just a social family one. So she lit up and said that national public radio, NPR, that was doing something for the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. So starting on January 20th, 2017, they were doing 100 days of call-in shows, and they deliberately chose journalists each night. There were 4 nights, and they did in the week, 2 liberal, 2 conservative journalists. Okay, and to try to have some balance. So Carrie was one of those, and she said, "Would you come on, and could you get 2 of the participants from the Ohio workshop to come on?" And so we did that in March, on March 2nd. And it was electrifying. The response, the phones lit up. The 2 women in Ohio, and I've forgotten their names, David, you probably.
Jaya and Rebecca. So Jaya was the blue and Rebecca was the red.
Yeah,
right.
And they had become friends after this. So they were in a studio, right, in Ohio. And then people asked them questions, and it was really a tremendous opportunity for a national audience with 2 of our participants who were models of this. It wasn't just me as the talking head. And that told us, because we got a lot of people contacting us. We barely had a website at that point, but people found us, right? And they said, could you come to our town? We'll put you up in our houses. Remember, they just said, please, please come our way. And we thought, wow, okay. I can tell you in my career, I've never had people saying that to me. I heard you speak. Would you please come? We'll put you up in our house. So this was big.
Yeah. And around that same time, then I remember it was probably March or so that I got a call one afternoon from David, and David said, what about the idea of let's go on a bus tour, and let's go across the country, and let's take these workshops on a bus tour. Let's rent a bus. What do you think? And at that time, I think it felt like we were on in baseball terms, we were on a hitting streak. We had like a 30-game hitting streak. So bus tour, yeah, why not? Absolutely. We got no money, but we've got people phoning in saying, hey, I'd like to do this, organize this in my community. I heard about you on NPR. I heard about you elsewhere. What can I do? And and I remember thinking, boy, that's a great idea to have a bus tour. I wonder what Bill will think about that crazy idea. What did you think about that crazy idea?
Yeah, what did you think, Bill?
It was the second crazy idea that Blankenhorn came up with. The first one was to even have the initial workshop. Right. Absolutely crazy. And then this was even worse. Okay. So, because what I was thinking is, do we even have something that's viable? I mean, I was the one that did the workshop and, sweat bullets at that first workshop, and so you guys were much more confident that we could actually do something on an extended basis. And I was still
you were thinking that we didn't have enough repetitions to be confident.
Yeah.
In the process.
Yeah.
Plus, we had no schedule. Right. We didn't have any workshops organized. Plus, we didn't have a nickel to our name.
Other than that,
we were ready to go.
By the way, so let's acknowledge that this is probably early April that David is suggesting that we have a 3-week tour. In July. Yeah, right. 2 months later.
Right away.
All right, let's go do it. Great, sounds good to me.
So I began to get more confident because we did some other workshops. I mean, in other words, the first time it was, oh my goodness. You said we're in a hitting streak at D-Lapp, and we had only had one game. Okay. And we had more hits than I expected.
Well, when was the second one, Bill? When was the second?
The second one was April 21st to 23rd. In Waynesville, Ohio.
Waynesville.
And it was another weekend at the barn.
Right.
And that was, of course, the documentary crew came for that one.
Right.
So that was our second.
So by the time we got on the bus, we had done 2.
Oh no, more actually.
Okay.
So part of this is that my own thinking, we repeated the first one, the 13 hours, and I fully was convinced that this was not scalable. 13 hours, a lot of time, a lot of work, and that if we were going to do something that could spread around the country, it couldn't be like a weekend retreat. You don't change the country with weekend retreats. And I wanted to see if we could create smaller doses of something that was this powerful, because I was convinced that if we didn't have smaller doses, like a 3-hour and a full day and that kind of thing, we were going to be we weren't going to have the kind of influence but there was an open question about whether the small dose would work. So what I did was, I'm looking at my.
Sorry, Bill, can I just say, I disagreed with you at the time.
Okay.
If you may recall. I didn't want to do this. I was a purist. I thought we had something really important, and I thought diluting it down with these little smaller chunks was some kind of sellout. And I really argued with you about this. And I think you must remember, David, I don't recall, I know you, I don't really honestly recall where you leaned on this, but I do remember that I disagreed from top to bottom with this decision.
Yeah.
And Bill, just showed leadership, and we did it, and it turned out to be an unbelievably smart decision, because we never could have grown, if we had just, the three of us, gone around and done, spent the rest of our lives doing weekend workshops. It never would have amounted to a national thing. So hats off to you, Bill. But yeah, where were you in all that, David?
Well, I mean, my main impression was thinking about so after that first weekend workshop in South Lebanon, and then that second weekend workshop in Waynesville, Ohio, which Waynesville is just 15 minutes from South Lebanon, rural southwest Ohio, how transformational that experience was for the participants. And so I just remember thinking, well, what we got is pretty good. And so how do we enable more of this to happen? But that was my main thing on my mind. And just to stick with that for a minute, and then I know there's more to say about the smaller dose ones, but that second weekend workshop, for instance, so that was the one that is the subject of a Braver Angels documentary that many people will have seen, called Reuniting America. It happened at the barn of Richard and Donna Lynch. Richard is an independent country singer. And it so happens that when I went out to tour the barn, they told us, oh yeah, we founded the local Tea Party here, back in 2010 or whenever, 2011 or whenever it was. And I was like, oh my gosh, perfect. Running into the right people here. And so they let us use the barn, and, we got together again. It was, 8 reds, 8 blues for a weekend gathering. And I remember so a couple days before, I was still trying to round up some participants. And I had put out a message on the Middletown, Ohio Facebook page, a Waynesville Facebook page, and so forth, looking for participants for this weekend workshop. And I got a call from this crazy guy who says, hey, I'm Greg Smith, and I saw, a posting on Facebook about a workshop, and I used to be a police officer, and I'd really like to attend this workshop. I think this will be really good. I said, wonderful, great. And then Greg knows this whole story. Greg is, many of you will know Greg as he's in that documentary, was one of our first Red leaders, one of the first Red co-chairs of that alliance, legendary Braver Angels leader. But so I was like, great, we've got our full roster of participants. I'm there on Friday evening setting up the barn and everything. And Donna, the host, Richard and Donna are the Tea Party leaders and the host of that place. I'm telling, oh yeah, Donna, actually, somebody Greg Smith is coming to this weekend workshop. And Donna said, you invited Greg to this workshop? Greg is extreme. Now, Donna won't be offended at this. Donna Lynch is a Tea Party leader. Many people would say Donna is extreme. And Donna was saying her friend Greg is beyond the pale. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh,
what have
we gotten ourselves into? We've got a documentary crew descending on this place, Emmy-winning producers making what kind of fights are going to break out? This is going to be a disaster. Well, as many of us know, as the rest of the story goes, that there was just a transformational event, an experience, including Greg and Kuyar, a blue, and they formed a friendship that helped to lead to the first alliance here. So anyway, it goes to show you, right, that from the beginning there, we were attracting people that some people said, oh my gosh, you invited that person?
Yeah. Hey, David, do you remember about the flag?
Yeah, tell us about the flag, David.
Well, Donna and Richard had a Tea Party a flag, the Live Free or Die flag became an emblem of the Tea Party, and they had a big flag in their barn. And one of the blue participants, or one of the people that was helping organize the blue participants, strongly objected that this flag was going to be there, that they would not attend a meeting where such imagery was shown because it was associated with horrible things. And why was this imagery being present at a time when we were trying to build bridges, not fan the flames of dissension? And oh my gosh. So we had a decision to make, which was what to do about this. And correct me if I'm wrong, David, I think you went to Donna and Richard and said some version of, we've had a few complaints and what do you think? And they said, well, no, just we're keeping the flag. I'm sorry, their complaints. And we decided that that was what we would go with, that we, it's their barn, they put a flag up, and somebody wants to bring another flag at the next event in their house, that's kind of our emerging ethic about this. But I remember also Peter Yarrow, the folk singer who was attracted to us by then, he made a personal video singing, serenading this woman who said, we're not coming if there's a video, and gave her a long talk about how, let's work with people and let's not get upset about this. And I'll say something from the stage that emphasizes the progressive nature that many of us have at this meeting. And it ended up being okay. It ended up working, and nobody walked out and all that. But it,
yeah, as I recall,
felt dicey at the time.
Peter Yarrow had the idea of Peter Yarrow is a progressive. He had the idea of bringing a Black Lives Matter flag, and so you could have both Black Lives Matter flag and the Live Free or Die flag. I don't think he was able to find one, but that was the spirit of it.
That's right.
And that was really, I think, set a template as well for the ethos of Bravery Angels.
It also helped us realize, and I don't want to push this too hard, but it helped us realize that going for neutrality never works. Going for the blandest possible neutral, like no one could possibly have an objection. No, everybody's gonna be themselves. If we're in somebody's house and they have a flag that other people don't like, that's fine. It's okay. We're not gonna try to anesthetize everything where people don't get to say what they think, and they don't, so it felt conceptually like a bridge that we had crossed at that time. Mm-hmm. Again, compelled by circumstances. I don't really remember us thinking all this through at the intellectual level, but we just kind of intuited our way toward that, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we should just mention too, so Peter Yarrow, he was kind of an early, somehow he heard about that first gathering. He ended up having lunch with you, David, in New York, and he was so captivated by this idea and said, how could I help? He, along with lots of other people, said, how could I help? And so he's the one that put us in touch with the Emmy-winning documentary producer and said, well, let's make a documentary of the next weekend workshop. And so that's what we did.
Peter raised the money. He talked him into doing a lot of it for free. He just really poured his heart and soul into it, and it's been a wonderful friend for us.
And so in terms of the workshop itself, I was able to make some design changes from the first one, because the first one, as I've said, had some rough spots, particularly around people asking questions in the question and answer exercise. They were not able to, with yours truly explaining for several long minutes the difference between,
they still didn't understand
a real question and a gotcha question. I went all out on that. And so made some design changes, which have stayed with our workshops, where people came up with the questions separately and so on. And so that workshop, and then we had 8, not 10. So that workshop went better. So I felt better about the design. Okay. And then I also want to highlight something else that happened there that stayed with us in our regular workshops ever since. when the red group and the blue group divided up to talk about the main stereotypes that people have of their own side, the false, negative, exaggerated stereotypes. In the red group, and you and I were, D-Lapp, you and I were in that, one of the members of the red group said, well, if we're going to be real here, folks, let's talk about some things that are true about these stereotypes. If we're going to be real, okay, and they went for it. So when the Reds presented their stereotypes, they said, well, and there's some kernels of truth in these, and they talked about this. The Blues did not to faulting them. The Blues actually just went with the directions, which was correct the stereotype. The Reds said, well, there's some truth in this, and it absolutely blew everybody's mind. I mean, it was so powerful, and it was and the Blues then stepped up their game subsequently in the workshop, and the whole Braver Angels idea of humility really came to the fore there. And so that piece of our workshop, which is correct the stereotypes of your side, and then what's the kernel of truth, which has become one of our hallmarks of our work, came from the red group at that workshop.
I remember right afterwards you saying, Bill, we're adding that to the workshop from now on.
That's a winner. That's a winner, and I'm very proud that that came out of the participants. So we were high as kites after that, as I recall. The documentary crew was there. You know, and people were so it was a concert, right? I mean, it was just powerful.
No fights broke out. To the contrary, there were some just powerful experiences in which people hugged, people shared stories, and people said, you know, in Kuyar, in Greg's case, Greg came up with this powerful idea in which Greg said, you know, Kuyar is an Iranian immigrant from the Muslim background, Greg, white evangelical Christian, and Greg said, Kuyar and I came up with an idea here. This was on Sunday afternoon, the last day of the weekend workshop. Greg said, I'm going to visit a mosque with him, and he's going to visit my church with me, and we're going to do this together. And just, whew, wow, what an idea. And they did. And it was that kind of thing that happened at that weekend. And again, it was the next Monday morning, I remember, we're debriefing at Golden Lamb, a restaurant here in Ohio. Okay, what are we going to do next and everything? And the whole time my phone is buzzing with with text messages. And the 15 participants from that workshop had formed the group chat and were plotting the next gathering, basically what would be the first Alliance meeting. And so that is what happened then. That first Alliance meeting was the participants from the first workshop and the participants from the second workshop coming together to say, hey, let's keep on working together.
So another example of how we were following the lead of our fellow citizens in this. And as you said, David B., in our last conversation, following the wind, because a lot of the wind was getting generated there. Then, now yours truly, after these peak experiences of 13 hours over a weekend, I was determined, and in fact, David B., I even forgot you argued with me because I was obviously so right that I couldn't remember your objections. That's anyway, right. But I
won the argument with one hand tied behind the back. No, I actually, honestly, Bill, I do not remember it. I mean, it's a humbling experience for me because I was very adamant and very wrong.
Well, thank you. So I'm looking at the schedule of events here. So April 21st to 23rd, we did that glorious second workshop. May 1st, I had already scheduled a 3-hour Red Blue workshop at Grace Lutheran Church in Apple Valley, Minnesota. 3 hours. Because I was determined to see if there could be a meaningful dosage.
What good can come from 3 hours?
This isn't going to work. That was actually, this isn't going to work. Bill will have to admit, this isn't going to work.
So one of the things I want folks to understand is that the first 2 workshops and then this third one, people were personally interviewed there was a vetting process because we were so nervous about whether this could work. Okay, that in Ohio, David L, you interviewed everybody. When I came back home, the pastor of Grace Lutheran Church, and the reason for that church, it was a red blue church, pretty evenly balanced, reds and blues, and the pastor personally invited 8 reds and 8 blues, and it was a terrific workshop. It was based around the fishbowl activity that a lot of our folks know about. And it was inspiring. It was inspiring. And so it told me a small dose could do something here. And then the next thing that happened was the first skills workshop. So I remember having this conversation with you folks that let's not only be a one-trick pony, that we have various versions of a red blue. Let's see if we could teach some skills. So that occurred on May 11th that year, 2017, at a healthcare clinic, and it was around the theme of political stress. And how to talk to loved ones who differ from you politically. And so that was the beginning of the skills part of what we're doing. However, one more story I want to get in here from the point of view of the design of these workshops. And then the question became, would we forever have to personally vet people for red blue workshops? In other words, everybody going to have to be approved to come, either by the pastor or by an interview, because you can't scale stuff there either, right? And so so in June of that year, the Eagan, Minnesota Public Library agreed to do a 3-hour red blue workshop, and they just put it on their website and put it out in their email list. And I just showed up, and it worked. It worked in terms of the dosage. It worked just as well as the 3-hour. It worked. People came. They were in it. The ground rules were clear. Nobody violated them. And that was another step. A lot of these are steps in how could we possibly take this to the country. And that was another key moment when you don't have to interview or vet everybody who comes.
Right.
And to be clear, when we're saying it worked, I think what you're saying, Bill, is that we had developed these evaluation forms, and it's people's own reporting of saying, yes, I have a much better understanding of people on the other side. Yes, I'm interested in following up on relationships formed here. So just from those evaluations done at the 3-hour workshop versus the weekend workshop, we were seeing that there was comparable impact there.
Yeah, and I wouldn't, not transformative, in the same way, but they were, in terms of a dosage, a meaningful dosage. Okay, both in terms of the evaluations and in the terms of the feel of the room, the way in which people afterwards lingered and talked to each other. And I remember there was an African-American blue in the workshop with the library, who in the fishbowl, he was a Democrat, but he ripped into his fellow Democrats for tokenizing Black people, only pay attention to Black people for elections. And that just really angered him. And then I remember a couple of Reds during the break, Red guys came up and really wanted to talk to him, and they followed up for coffee. And so there was that kind of stuff that was happening, which told me that we could develop some other doses of this, and we didn't have to vet people. At this point, moving us along now, we were preparing for the bus tour. So if it's okay, let's talk about the preparations for that, because that was sort of like a second founding of Braver Angels. It was so important for us. So who'd like to pick us up there?
Well, David, I'm interested. Where the heck did the idea of a bus tour? I mean, rock bands go on tours. We're just a little nonprofit talking about political polarization. Why a bus tour?
David, it just felt very romantic to me to get on a bus and drive around the country. honestly, I mean, it just felt like Walt Whitman and Huckleberry Finn, and it just felt like a great fun thing to do, just to hit the road. You know what I mean? Just go out in America, not in some fancy thing, but on a bus. Just get on a bus and drive around the country. I mean, it was just that level of simply, it caught a romantic feeling that I had. And once I got it in my brain, I couldn't get it out. And you're the first person I brought it up to, because it was sounded preposterous. I mean, how just logistically, financially, how could we possibly do such a thing on about a month's notice? And in your tradition, David, the more evangelical tradition, you know, the concept that you just give it up, you know, you just let Providence take care of things. And that was actually how I felt about it, really. And so a financial donor, one of the foundations.
Whoa, before you go there, hold on, because it didn't just happen like that. I remember, so this bus tour, friends, begins July 4th and wraps up July 25th.
Yeah.
It's June, like the middle of June, early middle of June. We're at what was the first, like, it wasn't what we now know as a Brave Angels convention. It was like the precursor to the Brave Angels convention. It was a gathering of like 40 leaders, friends of Brave Angels in Harrisonburg, Virginia.
Right.
And it's the first evening there. We're sitting in the lobby. People are coming in, and David is sitting there in the chair, and some of us are talking. And Sheila Clothorn, who's a Brave Angels leader, and she sees David kind of looks down, and Sheila says, "David, you look a little down. What's bothering you?" And David says, "Well, we're supposed to be doing this bus tour like 3 weeks from now, but we don't have the money for a bus. And so I'm not sure how it's going to happen."
And Sheila says, "I'm good for," and it was a lot of money. She just raised her hand. And David, that is exactly how it happened. And oh my. And then we had no itinerary. That was another consideration.
No bus and no itinerary, but
no
otherwise.
itinerary, no bus. So and so I remember saying, "Well, David, why don't you be in charge of itinerary?" And I remember you saying to me, "Well, what does that even mean? Like, what am I actually supposed to do?" And I just said, "So, well, I'll start making some phone calls. You know, some people had written in, you know, like, basically go figure it out. Just go figure it out." And but if you just think about it a minute, you're going to get on a bus, you're going to travel around from city to city. Well, which cities? And when you get to the city, what exactly is supposed to happen? This is a complicated activity. And we had none of that worked out. And I remember, David, I was so moved. I forget what Amber, your wife, actually said, but she told me something that, you worked like, 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for just weeks and weeks and weeks to get this done. And she said, "I've never seen anything like it. I know, you guys are just doing something that is improbable in the extreme, that you could possibly do it. And yet you're just plunging into it." And she said things about you that it honestly just brought tears to my eyes. And Bill, not only did Bill agree to just throw over his schedule and do this, but Leah, Bill, your wife, Leah, said, "I'm in too. This is crazy enough for me to be a part of it." So she was organizing the logistical questions for each work. So, how do you give them agendas and pay? This is incredible.
Well, that's generous. You make it sound like we asked Leah in advance to do this, and then no. It's like Leah showed up and saw that, wow, we could really use some organization
that's right.
here.
She was irritated that we didn't have things worked out very well.
She thought she was coming along to accompany me. It's actually part of our marriage that she had the sense that this would be a transformative experience for me. She wanted to come along. Right. But she thought she was going to read and work in her knitting and all that sort of stuff. And then she realized how completely disorganized we were, and then plunged in. And then some other folks too were important. Kieran O'Connor, so talk about how some other folks got involved in this bus tour.
Kieran got the spirit of it. Young guy that was here in New York, and I had known him because he went to school with my son and kind of family friends, and he thought it sounded interesting. So and it was all just on the most flimsy possible financial footing. I mean, David, I remember going into towns where you had spent a lot of time on the phone with people who you didn't know, right? Just to set some little
Yeah,
town.
this really is a remarkable. I mean, it's anyone who doubts the power of the generosity of America's volunteer spirit. You didn't organize that bus tour, because that was amazing, right? So Donna Murphy, who's a legendary Braver Angel leader, she heard that NPR broadcast that we talked about earlier. She wrote in. She had seen something on our website, something crazy about, would you like to organize something on the bus tour? She wrote in and she said, I heard about you at NPR, and I would like to organize one of these events for the bus tour. And, I wish we could say we got back to Donna like 2 hours later, but we were trying to get her, it was like she kept on writing to us. Finally, David was coming back from North Carolina for an event, and we were talking about, oh yeah, well, where's, what's the itinerary? And I said, oh yeah, there's somebody in Northern Virginia who really wants to organize. We should talk to her. And David said, well, what's her address? I'll stop by. I'm on the road. And so we called Donna and
knocked on her door, just knocked on her door. And then by the end of things, she said, I'm all in. Tell me what I'm supposed to do.
And it was that kind of just amazing generosity of just spirit and just wanting to get to work for the good of the country that Donna and many people like Donna did to organize these workshops.
And they had never laid eyes on us personally. That was the thing. We would go into a town, and Bill and I had done nothing to prepare. David, you had spent many hours reaching out to people, but we still never had actually laid eyes on them. So we get off on the bus and we said, are you? So yes, I'm so-and-so. Well, come to the spaghetti supper that's starting in 20 minutes at City Hall, and the mayor's here, and they're gonna say a good thing. And then you're staying in this person's house, and you're staying in this person's house, and in the morning we'll get to see the venue, and then it starts at noon. I mean, that's what happened day after day after day. It was amazing.
Yeah, it started in Waynesville, Ohio at Richard and Donna Lynch's ranch, where we had a concert with Peter Yarrow, the progressive folk singer, and Richard Lynch, the independent Tea Party country singer. And then we went from there on to Pennsylvania, and all the way up to St. Albans, Vermont, and back down to Northern Virginia, and ended in Philadelphia. Bill, you got to share the memorable event, though, when we were in New York. I think it was the Ithaca, New York area. We had a Red Blue workshop at a daycare center. And we showed up to the daycare center. And Bill, take it away. What happened?
Well, the night before, there was no water in the house that you had rented, D. Lapp, for us. Okay,
Yeah.
So that
Every time something went bad, we said, well, David's in charge.
David was the one that set it up.
Yeah.
And so we showed up at this daycare center thinking we were going to be meeting in the staff lounge. Well, daycare centers don't have staff lounges. I don't know why I didn't realize that. And so when we finally got in the room, because we couldn't get the key, it was set up for 3 and 4-year-olds. The tables were, about 3 feet off the ground, and the little mini chairs. And there were about 3 chairs for grown-ups in the whole place. And we had, 16 people coming, in
about 45 minutes. I remember you saying, Bill, what does this come to? I mean, here I am. I'm standing in a kindergarten room. They're all going to be here any minute.
And by the way, we're already exhausted by this time. It was going over and over. It's like, I'm out. I'm out. Okay. But people rallied. They went and got chairs. It worked. Somebody figured out you could extend the tables by, the legs would go up.
Right.
However, there was just one toilet in the whole place, which by the end of the day was not working well. And so not usable. People were going outside to relieve themselves. And then the last half hour, the septic tank truck had come and was pumping in a loud way, pumping the whole time as we finished the workshop. So it was that kind of thing that.
But these were things that they were all being donated to us. We did, and I mean, it made me sound like we're just people, oh, it was good old days or something like that. But what I would like to communicate to people, anybody who's listening in, is just what an astonishing experience it was to have this kind of reaction from people who we did not know. We did not know these people. And they went to great amounts of work to get everything ready for us. They sacrificed, they fed us, they housed us, they reached out to their neighbors, all speculatively, right? All based on something that we hoped would happen. So it's really strangers in a sense. I mean, David was calling people and, oh, you wrote us about, but essentially just people, just citizens who did not know one another, coming together to try to do something meaningful for the country. I mean, really, that's what it was. And it was quite something to be a part of.
Two notes about that. One is just thinking about how, but we still did not have a plan. There was still no master plan for what we were going to do. Well, so what we did have
too
was
much fun just driving around, David.
But there is a brilliance here that I want to note, which is it's a grassroots bottom-up relational approach to seeing, okay, well, what's happening in the country and what might we be able to do together as fellow citizens to address this? And we were finding the solutions and the answers in daycare centers and in rural barns and in Northern Virginia, VFW halls, and so forth. Yeah. And it was the sense of, you know what, we're coming up with the strategy here together as fellow citizens to address this. And none of this could have happened if we had a highly kind of bureaucratic, even suspicious, or like, well, are you, how depolarized are you here? Are you really, can we trust you? Why should we trust you? It all depended on a kind of all around, just this generosity of spirit, assuming charity, assuming goodwill, and beautiful things happen because of that.
Well, yes. And then I'll add from a programmatic standpoint that this gave us a chance to practice our workshops over and over and over. So I liked, when I give presentations, I like to say we were a B-League basketball team going from town to town, playing every night, trying plays, seeing what worked, and processing it after each one. And so we had enough repetitions, again, to use the sports analogy. It gave us lots of repetitions of the workshop. The regular workshop, we'd only had 3 or 4 up to that point, but lots of them. The same thing with the skills workshop. So by the time we finished the tour, from a workshop design perspective, I felt we had some solid workshops. We tried the 3-hour, we tried a day-long workshop, we did a weekend workshop. So we had the skills workshop. So we kind of knew what we were offering at that point.
Hey, Bill, can I tell a quick story at your expense?
Sure, Dave, you're going to anyway, so go for it.
I forget why, but you had to miss a workshop. I forget whether it was
I went home. I had to go home.
You had a personal reason, so you had to miss a day or something. And Kieran and I co-chaired. That was the first workshop you had not been the lead chair for. And I think you were a little nervous, like, oh, and so we said, oh, we can do it. So we did the workshop. Kieran comes up to me afterwards. It's the first time Kieran had done anything at a workshop other than observe. Kieran said, well, did you remember something happened? He said, I think it was better that we did it this way. I think we didn't plan that. It was just better. And I'd like to see if we shouldn't incorporate this into our workshop. I said, well, good luck telling Bill this. And so we were sitting on the bus, and he came up to you. I don't know if you remember this
I
conversation.
remember it.
He came up and very, very gently said he had a thought about how to change the workshop. This guy who had been doing this a minute and a half told you, who invented the workshop, and had just done 25 in 25 nights. But Kieran had this idea, and it took you a moment to collect your wits, I thought, but then you said, well, now that's interesting. Let's try that again, and let's see how it works. And so it, I don't know. To me, it communicated something of the, not just the esprit de corps, but also just the idea that we were trying things out, trying to get it right. And we were open to considering changes that evolved.
And so before we leave the bus tour, let's also mention April Lawson, now April Cornfield, joined us for a good substantial part of the bus tour. She was editorial assistant for David Brooks and got permission from him and the Times to come and follow us. And so she became, of course, she's one of our great leaders now. And she became part of this sort of think tank aspect of this. So we had people like her and Kieran and others observing the workshops and participating in the process.
It was great. People would just kind of get on the bus. People would say, oh, can I ride with you from here to there? And April was kind of like an embedded journalist. And but it became very clear to us all, I think, from the very beginning that April was a very unusual person, a really gifted leader. And so her transition from observing journalist to participating leader was pretty quick. And
then Kieran became one of our leaders there as well.
Kieran handled quickly demonstrated that anything related to public communication, working with the media, he was really, really good at. And anything related to sort of the public facing of the effort. And so it was, yeah, that was the main crew. And then some people just got on. I remember, David, you had to go home for a few days.
Yeah, I mean, I have kids at home, I can't
Yeah,
be out on the road for
had
3 weeks. I gotta
you
say.
had actual other responsibilities.
Right.
And I think it was you or me, one of us just called Kuyar, a guy with a full-time job, whose experience was he had gone to the workshop like 2 months ago. And we said some version of, Kuyar, can you take a week off, drive to where we are, get on the bus with us, and organize every little detail of this bus tour for 5 days while David goes home to do something he needs to do. Kuyar says, oh, and we can't give you a nickel, you'll pay for everything. Kuyar says, absolutely. I'm hitting the road tomorrow. I'll join. And that's how this went.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So let's, in terms of time, we have a couple more things to cover before we finish up. So we really had some decisions to make now. We had, remember, David B, you were saying we have like lightning in a bottle. That was your metaphor on the bus tour, lightning in a bottle. I should mention that the journalists were turning out everywhere we went. The conservative journalists, liberal journalists, Al Jazeera, I remember, filmed one of the, it was just it was electrifying. And then we had to really make some decisions about what we were going to be doing in the future. And we had a little retreat with 6 or 7 or 8 people. And we had some decisions to make then about forming alliances, David, like the Lapp, like in Ohio, there was a group kind of, you brought some ideas about forming alliances. We had to decide who could do these workshops except us, right? Because you can't scale something there. So moderator change. We had a number of decisions to make. And so again, thinking about our time here, if somebody want to just sort of describe that process of making some really crucial decisions that shape the future of Braver Angels.
What's your take, David?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember going to that leadership meeting August 24th through 26th, and David, I remember you had the conviction that the local groups, and you suggested the word alliances as the term for our local chapters, that this would be a crucial building block for us going forward in terms of scaling. So maybe you could talk a little bit about why you saw alliances as part of that, and where did the term alliance come from?
Oh, I love the history of a group called the Farmers Alliance from the late 19th century, and they formed what they called alliances, which is groups of farmers around the country who were working for, I think, some really good causes. So they became a powerful organization, eventually evolved into a political party and kind of petered out after a while, but they had this period of growth where they would send farmers from community to community to form these local groups they called alliances. I was very inspired by that. And it just seemed like what had happened in Ohio, where people said, we want to keep meeting. It just seemed like we should take our cue, and see if people would keep doing that, because as good as it was, as good as it felt to have people have these one-time experiences, the real purpose of the whole thing, I think it was becoming clear to me and perhaps all of us, was to develop citizen leaders, not to just be consumers of an experience, but to actually develop leaders, to lead their community and ultimately to lead the country. And the only way you do that is by having an ongoing effort with members and leaders and local groups and people putting in lots of time every week, getting to know one another from different parts of the country. So, I mean, I don't know what y'all remember. I think that began to gel in our minds a little bit by the end of the bus tour. I mean, we sort of, we couldn't just keep doing these bus tours forever, as fun as they were. And so that, at least in my mind, it was beginning to, the fog was beginning to clear a little bit, and I could see, okay, we're building leadership. We want to have a national movement. We've been given some clues by the universe as to how to do that. Let's do it.
And we made the decision to, so at this point, the plan, we started building the plan, and we started having the 1 year strategic plan with goals and so forth. And key to that was alliances and moderators and organizers. And so, and a key decision there, as you said, Bill, was the decision to train volunteer moderators to do what you mainly had been doing, Bill, and not just to train them in person, which we did do on a fall bus tour. So we made the decision to have some moderator trainings in person, but not just to train it in person, but to take that training online. And that was key to the scaling. You want to talk about that, Bill?
Yeah, there are a couple of important decisions here. One was that the workshops would require good but not master level facilitation skills and teaching skills. So you had to have some experience at running groups. If you're doing a skills workshop, you had to be able to present to people, but not highest level. Because if you have very difficult to pull off workshops and experiences, you have very few people who can do it, and you just don't scale anything. So by the end of the bus tour, we had it at the level where folks with some decent background could do this stuff, so that was one. So then the second was, well, how do you train them? And so the first thing was we did some face-to-face trainings. 30 people in a room. We did that on the East Coast. We did several of those. David B., you and I did some of those together. And that's a standard training approach for professionals. A lot of these were teachers and social workers and others. But it really struck me that there's a limitation there. One is that if I'm going to be the trainer, I'm not going to be flying all over the country and training people. And these were local DC area folks mostly. And somebody in Idaho would have to would have to buy a plane ticket to Chicago or Washington and spend, $1,000 in a hotel room, and so.
Which they were doing, by the way. They were doing that.
Yeah, some of them were doing it, but
But we did not, I think you realized that we couldn't, we could actually have hundreds, but we couldn't have thousands.
We couldn't have thousands, that's right. So we decided to put all the training online. And to trust a couple of things. And there were some colleagues of ours in Braver Angels, particularly people in the professions like therapy, who I had some struggle with on this, because this was not the model, okay? Because it meant we didn't lay eyes on people. They took the training, and until they had a little online orientation at the end, we didn't lay eyes on them. But what I had learned in my professional work is when you create a lot of expense for people to get credentialed in something, they want to earn a living on it. They want to get it back. It's understandably. And we decided early on, gentlemen, if you remember, nobody's going to pay for any of our workshops. And then with the moderator's not going to be paid. It's all going to be given away. So we were going to be asking people, so I didn't want to be asking people to spend thousands of dollars to fly across the country. And by the way, the fire hose approach to training, I've come to believe in my own work, is not as good as an online where people can do it in doses and go back and forth. And then the last thing is, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? A workshop bombs. We're not training people to do brain surgery here, okay? So some workshops don't work. Number two, there's always an organizer, and there's usually co-moderators around. So if somebody is not very good, there's other people who kind of know it. And thirdly, this is trusting our fellow citizens. If somebody's not good at something, they sort of have the sense, I'm not so good at it, I'll do something else. As opposed to, we're going to create these standards, right? These credentialing standards that people have to meet, and they have to pass exams and all. You don't create a movement that way. And so that was a key decision. So there's somebody in Wyoming could say, I want to get this training, and they could do it online, and they could, organize something locally without having to fly to where we are. So those are crucial decisions in terms of becoming who we are.
I look upon that as the pivotal turning point for the organization. As I think back on it now, if we had not done that, and Bill, that was your thinking. If we had not done that, we would have stayed small. And yeah. And this idea has come up several times in this conversation of trusting people. Mm-hmm. The idea of trust is an abundant good, that if you give it, you get more of it. I remember seeing some of these moderators, these newly trained moderators, moderate their first workshop. And you think some of them were nervous? Of course they were. Some of them had to have, I remember seeing a couple of them, they would have the booklet, the training booklet, they would be holding it in their hands so they could refer to it while they moderated their workshop. But it worked out beautifully because people got it. They usually said, this is the first time I'm doing this. And it worked because people were working together, and, they didn't expect highly polished, it was a gorgeous thing to see, especially these first-time moderators who, wouldn't you be nervous if you're doing it for the first time? Well, they were, and yet it worked. It just worked.
I guess just as a closing comment for myself, it strikes me that key part for us early on here was the complementarity of having crucial guardrails and some critical structure built in. That's always been a hallmark of our work. But doing that also with a lot of charity, assuming goodwill, a lot of trust, and so it was never over structured. I would say the right amount of structure, and that's difficult to pull off.
Yeah, so I'll say a sort of a final word here too, to pull some of it together, and then David B, ask you as well. And so for me, our second of these conversations, this theme of learning from our fellow citizens as we go here and trusting. That really stands out. We're kind of on this call because we're the founders, but really stands out to me is how much we followed. We had some ideas and we followed some leads and kind of harvested creativity and energy. David B., your story about Couillard, just telling his boss, I'm going to be gone for a week, right? And just so many other,
in a week.
so many other stories of people stepping up. And that for me has been what we tried to have in Braver Angels ever since. So those are some final reflection for me. And so David B.
That's the main thing I get out of it. And as I think about what it means to be a leader, and we've tried, the three of us, along with many other people, we've tried to do this these last 5 years. We've tried to be leaders, and with mixed success, as all leadership efforts are. But I remember I've always been inspired by something that Ella Baker, a civil rights leader, told Martin Luther King, who was the big leader. She said, she was chastising him a little bit, and she said, we don't need leader centered movements. We need movement centered leaders. And I think if we've gotten anything right, on our best days, we've tried our best to be a movement-centered form of leadership, which involves trying to do things a certain way that allow you to more follow sometimes than actually be the band leader. And I think for me at least, that's, if I dig deep into what's at the bottom of all of this in terms of how one tries to do this, that would be it.
So David Lapp, do you want to take us out here?
Yeah, it's been a joy to share this conversation with you all, and we welcome your feedback to this podcast. Send us an email, media@braverangels.org. What did you think of this conversation? We take compliments, criticisms, and questions. We want to keep the conversation going. And if you believe in what we're doing at Braver Angels and you're not already a member, become a member. Go to braverangels.org/join and join the movement. That's all for today. Until next time, let's go out there and build a house united.